Welcome to all our viewers. My name is Aisha Nag and you are tuning in to PW Talk, a Gulf News Property Weekly production where we discuss the most topical issues in the real estate market. Value-added tax or VAT has been introduced in the UAE and the rest of the GCC as part of a program to diversify the regional economy. In the UAE, VAT was introduced on January 1st this year. And now, 6 months into its implementation, we look at how the real estate industry has reacted to the new tax scheme. In particular, we ask, has VAT had a major impact on real estate? To help us answer that question, I'm joined here at Gulf News Studio by John Stevens, Managing Director of real estate services firm Asteco. Welcome, John.
Thank you.
And Mario Volpe, Sales and Leasing Manager of Engel & Volkers, also a real estate services company. Welcome, Mario. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So let's start with the question everyone is asking, John. What has been the immediate impact of VAT on real estate?
I think the immediate impact on VAT was always expected to be limited, and it has proven to be so. We've had VAT implemented 5% here in the UAE. Obviously, that's one of the lowest rates in the world. You've got other countries, Bhutan, for example, is up to 50% VAT. And what it's applicable on for in terms of real estate is more limited. So don't believe that it's had a noticeable direct effect on most segments of the real estate market.
Okay. Mario, what kind of feedback have you got in this 6 months when you've worked on site with other brokers and with your clients?
Well, I echo what John was saying.
Yeah.
I think the sentiment when it was first announced that we were going to get VAT was one of not so much shock and horror, because it is an extra cost, but it definitely hasn't turned out to be the problem that perhaps a few people have thought. And so, especially when you're dealing with the residential market, it hasn't impacted it at all. When you're coming to the commercial market, then clearly there are extra costs involved which have to be factored in. But for the first 6 months, honestly, I think it's been fairly well received in that respect, and it's a tax that is needed for the government to spend on all the infrastructure projects that obviously is up on coming leading up to 2020.
Right. But Mario, even though residential rents and sales are not covered by VAT, services like broker, consultancy, maintenance, supplier payments are covered by VAT. And for the most part, it will be the seller, the developer, the landlord who has to bear these expenses. So will there be a certain pressure on landlords, on developers to increase their prices to cover this additional cost? Have you seen that?
I think most people would look at increasing costs in a rising market to try and obviously offset whatever costs they would have to pay. But we're not in that type of a marketplace. So even if we are talking residentially, you will find that the landlord, the seller, if he was looking to offset that cost, if he would put the prices up, he would then not be in a competitive situation, and his property would then remain vacant or empty or whatever. So we haven't seen that, to be very honest with you. And so right now I believe that these people who have had to pay these have absorbed these costs.
Well, going on to commercial real estate, have you noticed any movement or activity, John, in the commercial real estate leases that may have been as a result of that?
I'd have to echo what Mario said. I think if we were in a booming market and the landlords were easily able to transfer those costs to the incoming tenants, they would have. Obviously, we're in a competitive marketplace. Landlords have basically absorbed the VAT. They've absorbed, because the suppliers and the services that they're using have also incurred VAT, they've absorbed those increasing costs to retain their tenants. So no, it hasn't had current market conditions haven't allowed it to show its face.
Mario, for residential and commercial tenants or for home buyers who use the services of brokers or pay maintenance services, how can they verify that the agents or businesses they are dealing with are registered to charge VAT?
Okay, so obviously if you're having to be charged VAT, you have to have a tax number. It's called a tax registration number, TRN. So you would have to go to the federal tax office and input the name of the company, and it will show whether that company is liable to actually charge for tax.
The invoice, I mean, if I may,
On the invoice,
the
yeah.
invoice would also reflect the TRN
It would
number.
have the number on
So
there.
these
for
should be
sure.
checked.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, if somebody is being charged VAT
Yeah.
and is not being given a proper invoice with that information on it, my advice would be to actually question it or not to pay it at all, or ask them to show that they are eligible to charge the tax.
Correct.
Okay.
If the invoice doesn't have a TRN number on it, but it's listed as VAT, then you're not obligated to necessarily pay it.
Okay. John, Asteco has released its second quarter market report, and it mentions that property prices remain competitive and favorable to tenants and home buyers. How long do you think that this kind of tenants market or buyers market is going to persist? Would VAT have an impact on this tenants market in the medium to long term?
I don't think on the residential sector,
Yeah.
not so much. Part of the clarification that we got very early on when VAT was implemented was in terms of the owners association.
Right.
So as an owner,
Yes.
service charges are being charged VAT at the current moment in time. I'm aware of discussions at a regulatory and community level amongst those of us in that industry that are looking to see that we get owners associations not subject to VAT because they are non-profit organisations. So the residential sector, it's the maintenance. You as an owner of a property would be paying VAT on your maintenance and on your operational costs of it. But as a tenant, I don't think it's necessarily going to directly have much of an effect on you. In terms of supply and in terms of the tenant market, obviously you've just released Q2. We're in the summer period. Our history or our track record shows that peak time for new leases and renewals are May to November. So realistically, you would be looking towards Q4 2018 to see if there's a noticeable shift. The new supply that's coming onto the market is obviously putting it into tenants' favour. As units are handed over, if you're a property owner who has a mortgage to pay, you're going to want to get a tenant in there as quickly as possible to cover your mortgage. So I think that the favourable conditions for tenants are going to last.
To remain now.
Whether it's in terms of rent or in terms of choice, because there is a lot more choice coming, it's going to be good for tenants.
So clearly a tenants market and getting value for money as well.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. For our viewers, you are here at the PW Talk, and we are here with John Stevens of Asteco and Mario Volpi of Engel & Volkers to talk about the impact on VAT on real estate, and especially for tenants and homeowners. Mario, coming to you, given the consumer-friendly rates we are seeing in the market, based on your own research, which areas do you recommend for families who are now moving into Dubai and would like to lease in during the summer and going into September?
So you're talking about leasing or for buying?
As well as for buying, yeah.
Okay, well, I mean, apart from the usual hotspots of Dubai, what we're finding at Engel & Volkers is areas that are up and coming due to infrastructure spending, such as, for example, Al Fajan is a bit of a hotspot for families. And also individuals, because there are also a lot of apartments there too. So the good thing about that area is that it'll have not one but two metro stations linking up the expo site. Not until I think 2019, I think is when the metro is going to be live. But you've got Ibn Battuta Mall there, and it's not a million miles away from the marina. And for those needing to travel, obviously to Abu Dhabi, it's quite a good area. It's got some great family villas and townhouses there, and of course apartments. Other areas, again, same for value for money. You're probably looking at Sport City, some parts of Dubai Land. There are some really good individual developers now who are trying to sell their ready property stock, and they're offering some very good deals at the moment. So everywhere tends to act like a sponge, to be very honest with you. So that the choice for the buyer or the tenant right now is very, very varied.
Okay. John, with VAT adding to the overall real estate construction costs, do you think this will have an effect on developers' ability to offer attractive payment schemes? Like last couple of months, we've seen some very great post-handover schemes. So do you think we will see less of those as we go, or it's going to,
No, I mean, for the developments that are already
Yeah.
under construction, I think that most developers were aware that VAT was coming
Yeah.
and would have factored that into their should have factored
Yeah.
that into their construction costs. So I don't necessarily think that that's going to have a direct effect on the offers that you're seeing
Yeah.
in terms of the post-completion payment plans.
Right.
It's a question of what other schemes that will come up and will be developed. Obviously, post-completion payment plans have come in the last few years. We can see on the horizon there may be much more of the actual formal rent to buy type schemes.
Okay.
But all of these are going to be developers looking at their returns that they're able to generate from the projects that they're selling.
If I may add to that,
Yeah.
because that's a very important part at the moment of our business. We're developing rent to own, for sure,
Okay.
in Alpha Jan, funnily enough,
okay.
where perhaps the project wasn't selling as much because people have difficulty to raise the 25% deposit.
Yeah.
And so what is being offered now is the ability to live in a property from a rental point of view,
Okay.
and the money is then put towards that 25%. The minute it hits
Right.
25%, the person then get a mortgage. Now this for me is a catalyst, and I think you'll find that there'll be many, many more of these type of projects,
Coming in.
type of offerings coming in, irrespective of the VAT, because now the developer will have to offload stock, and this is stock that had perhaps been on the market for a while, and so it's no longer off plan, it's ready, which is why you can obviously rent it, and it isn't just small developers, the bigger boys are also doing it. Nikhil, for example, is offering 5-year post handover payment plans, again in Alpha Jan, which is why we're heavily involved in this area, and we're seeing a lot of activity there. So we had a great Ramadan, for example, which normally it's quiet. It was more the post handover payment plan, as John was saying.
Yeah.
These are the keys, and in fact EMAR now has jumped on the same bandwagon.
Yes, we just saw one of the,
And so it's a success story.
Right.
People can actually pay a very small amount of money,
Right.
5%, and actually 5 or 10% depending on the development, and can actually move in, and the rest of the monies can be paid over a 5-year period. And for me as an estate agent, well, there is so much pent-up demand wanting to buy, but they haven't been able to raise that sort of 31% by the time you've factored in 25% deposit plus the 4% and 2% agency fees. So this has stopped people from buying. But with these plans, people are now starting to buy.
Yeah, because it's that 20% versus that 5% where they can pay in 5% and get in.
Exactly.
Yeah,
And then they don't have to pay a rent somewhere else. Because often when you're trying to raise money or save money, you're still paying for school fees, you're still paying for rent, and it's difficult to save while you'll still have all these outgoings. You see, this is a very great solution.
Great scheme. Okay. And but I mean, after VAT started in, what were homeowners and tenants most confused about? Like, what were the confusing signals that they were getting or they were coming back with?
Well, I think most people either didn't listen or didn't read carefully, and they just weren't sure what was VAT-able, if I could put it that way, or who was liable to pay. I mean, at the beginning, we had people saying, well, we're not going to pay the VAT, you pay it. But, it's a consumer product, and it is the end consumer that has to pay it. Obviously, it goes in and goes out. So for a lot of companies, it is cash flow. But most of the confusion really was who has to pay it, and do I have to as well? So there was that. But now we're saying, look, it's mandatory. It's a federal tax. It's not us or any other company that is trying to cream a little bit more profits for us. No. We have to pay it, and it is on the end consumer. So for me, it was the confusion as to who had to pay it, and when.
Okay, I mean, shortly after, like a few months after VAT, in fact, a couple of weeks back, we had these new visa reforms that were introduced. John, do you think this will boost the residential real estate sector with the 10-year visas, with students having to stay in and pursue their higher education? Do you think you're going to see a movement once?
I think they're all incentives to investors to invest in the country and for residents to invest in the country. I mean, you have to think if you're here and you've got kids, you do see people leaving when their kids get to universities because the exactly the issue with the visa, that once their kids have reached the age of 18, how do they remain here? So I think that these initiatives are good, and they will underlie an improvement in sentiment in the marketplace. Obviously, we need to see more detail and how people will be able to secure the 10-year visas. Whether it's going to expand to cover property purchases as well, rather than just the professions, and again the incentive further down in the capital, the incentives scheme that they implemented. I think that the government are taking the right steps to bolster and support the real estate industry with their own incentives as well.
Okay. But John, if at this strategic moment with 6 months of VAT, new visa reforms coming in, the Expo 2020 a couple of years away, what would your advice be to people who are planning to invest in buying a property now? So what, as a consultant, as an expert in this area, what would you advise?
Again, it's what there's a number of different reasons for investing in property, and it's what your reason is. If you're looking at purely as an investment vehicle, then it's what you're looking for is the returns or the capital appreciation. So obviously at the moment in time there are a number of schemes in town in Dubai that are offering very high returns to an investor. Capital appreciation at the current moment in time with the market sentiment, you're looking more in the medium term. Where do you think which properties are going to be demanded in 3-5 years, 5 years time, and are being sold at a price now where you can easily perceive that there will be a capital growth. The end users, again, following on what Mario says, is there's a huge pent-up demand from people who want to buy property here in the UAE that are not able to build up that 30% deposit. So those that can, there are opportunities to buy homes for your family. And again, as we're seeing in the marketplace, the prices are falling. It's at what point that maybe the calculation with what you're paying in rent and what your new mortgage would be means that, yes, look, it's time for me to move. But then with the schemes that you're looking at with the post-handover completion payment plans, hopefully the regulatory changes that are required to make a rent-to-own scheme in place, these are going to facilitate that pent-up demand coming into the marketplace. So
so it's...
I think it's a great time to buy, if I can put my tuppence worth in. I mean, timing in business is everything, and as John says, if it's for investment, then it is business. Do the figures work? There's no emotions involved. When it's for your home, then there are many more sort of softer things involved, if I can put it that way. But right now, you could argue that we are, if we're not at the bottom, we are close to it, in my opinion, and that we may still see a few months or several months or a quarter or two of perhaps further reductions. But I think we're there and thereabouts. I mean, you mentioned that we're 2 years away from Expo 2020. Now, definitely Dubai will be, the world will be looking at Dubai from a very positive perspective. So the future for property, I believe, is that we are at a good time to buy. If you're looking at just from a price point of view. If you are considering to move, now will be a good time at least to have a look. Put your feelers out there and see what's out there. And if what you're looking for is out there, I would not necessarily wait too long. It's very easy to say, oh yeah, we should have bought then, because we can actually see when that was the bottom of the market. But I personally think we're fairly close to it. Maybe things might pick up next year. And that being the case, people will be kicking themselves if they didn't do something perhaps in 2018.
Right.
I think also on that point with what Mario's saying is that there's two segments. There's the off-plan and there's the completed stock. When we're releasing reports about transactional values, this is more on what's available in the marketplace, what's completed. Secondary market. So those owners, depending on when they buy, when they bought, could be, even if the prices have dropped by 5-10%, they're still shown growth. On the off-plan side, again, it's, as Mario's rightly said, a time to buy is we're looking at projects and the feasibility of the construction of the projects. And due to construction costs, land prices, developers are selling stock not greatly inflated from cost at the current moment in time. So when it comes to reducing prices further on the off-plan, on the future projects, you're getting down to they don't really have that much to go, because not much further to go, because that's the cost of their construction.
Right.
I think you're more likely to see a slowdown in the new releases and the delivery of these projects.
Okay.
But again, the delivery element is problematic for developers with the post-completion payment plans, because they don't get any money until they hand them over. So it's actually in the interest of developers to hand them over on time, and the payment plans kick in.
Okay, that was an insightful discussion about the implications of VAT in real estate, and we would like to thank our guests, John Stevens and Mario Volpi. Join us in other editions of PW Talk, where we discuss the most topical issues in the real estate market. And if you have topics that you want to be discussed on the show, drop us a line at propertyweekly@gulfnews.com.